rise and fall of your chest.
Yeah.
Don't worry if your mind wanders. Just gently guide it back to the breath.
Okay.
You'll be surprised how this simple practice can shift your awareness over time.
That feels doable.
Yeah,
I'm definitely sensing a theme here of being kind to ourselves in this whole process.
yeah, I agree.
The sources also talked a lot about intentions,
Right.
and I've always found those a bit tricky.
Yeah, I understand.
What makes an intention truly effective in this context?
It all comes back to the why behind it.
Okay.
Are your intentions driven by fear, insecurity, or the need to please others?
Or are they rooted in love, growth, and a genuine desire to express your authentic self?
Right.
The energy behind those two approaches is completely different.
So an intention to lose weight to fit in has a totally different vibe than nurture my body because I love and respect it.
Exactly. The first intention is coming from a place of lack,
Right.
while the second is grounded in self-love.
Yeah.
It's a subtle shift,
Right.
but it makes all the difference in how that intention manifests in your life.
This makes me wonder about those times when I set an intention,
Yeah.
but then life throws a curveball,
Yeah, right.
and I feel like I've totally failed.
Right.
The sources talked about self-compassion,
Yeah.
and I think I need a crash course in that.
Okay.
How do we deal with those inevitable setbacks
Yeah.
without beating ourselves up?
Self-compassion is essential, especially when we're trying to grow and change. It's about offering yourself the same kindness and understanding you'd give a close friend. Remember, making mistakes and facing challenges are a natural part of the process.
It's easier said than done, though, right?
Yeah.
Like intellectually, I know I shouldn't be so hard on myself,
Yeah.
but then that inner critic takes over.
That inner critic is something we all deal with. But we can start to shift that voice by paying attention to our self-talk.
Okay.
Notice when you're being harsh and judgmental, then consciously try to replace those negative messages with encouragement.
Right.
What would you say to a friend in the same situation?
Yeah.
Offer yourself that same compassion.
So instead of, I'm such an idiot for messing that up, it's more like, okay, that didn't go as planned, but I'm learning from it.
That's the spirit.
Okay.
And remember, self-care is a huge part of self-compassion. What nourishes you?
Yeah.
What brings you joy and helps you recharge? Make time for those things, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
This is all making so much sense, but it also raises a question for me. If we're already whole, like we talked about, why do we even feel this need to improve in the first place?
Yeah.
Where does that drive come from?
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's been a fascinating conversation so far.
I'm so glad we're digging into this. Last time, we were talking about how self-improvement from this spiritual perspective isn't about fixing ourselves,
Right.
but rather uncovering our wholeness and becoming aware of the thoughts and patterns that might be clouding that truth.
Exactly. And that brings us to a concept that was really emphasized in the sources you shared.
Okay.
The idea of balance.
Balance. Okay.
It's easy to get caught up in the striving aspect of self-improvement, always pushing for more,
Right.
but neglecting the acceptance of where we are right now.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between pushing ourselves to grow and being content with who we are in this moment. I struggle with that, I'll admit.
It's definitely a dance.
Yeah.
Imagine you're constantly striving, always focused on the next goal. You miss out on the richness of the present moment.
Right.
But if you become complacent, you might miss opportunities for growth.
Right.
Finding that balance is key.
Okay, so how do we actually find that balance?
Yeah.
The sources mentioned being present. Is that the answer?
Presence is a huge part of it.
Okay.
Think about it. The present moment is the only place where life actually unfolds.
Right.
It's the only place where change and growth can happen.
Yeah.
When you're fully present, you can appreciate each moment regardless of how far you are on your journey toward any particular goal.
That makes so much sense, but honestly, with the pace of life, it's so easy to get caught up in that mental to-do list.
Yeah.
How do we actually train ourselves to be more present?
Mindfulness and meditation are the most powerful tools we have.
Right.
They help us develop that presence muscle, so to speak.
Okay.
Even a few minutes each day can make a huge difference. The key is consistency.
And what about the actual goals themselves? Is there a way to set goals that support this sense of balance?
Absolutely. Setting realistic and achievable goals is crucial. It's great to have big aspirations, but break them down into smaller, manageable steps.
Right.
That way you're less likely to get overwhelmed.
Right.
And you can celebrate those small victories along the way.
I love that, celebrating the small wins. It's so easy to just keep raising the bar and never really acknowledging how far we've come.
It's a trap we often fall into.
Yeah.
But shifting our perspective from not enough to gratitude for our progress can make a huge difference in how we experience the journey.
Speaking of shifting perspectives, the sources you sent also talked about the importance of holistic self-improvement, right?
Yes.
Not just focusing on one area,
Yeah.
but looking at the whole picture.
That's a key point. True growth involves all dimensions of our being.
Hmm.
Physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Neglecting any one of these areas can create imbalances. Think of it like a four-legged stool. If one leg is shorter than the others, the whole thing becomes wobbly.
Okay, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So let's break down each of these dimensions. How can we approach the physical aspect of self-improvement in a holistic way?
Physically, it's about prioritizing practices that support our well-being and vitality.
Good.
Things like regular exercise, nourishing ourselves with healthy food, getting enough sleep, and moving our bodies in ways that feel good. It's also about listening to our body's signals and responding with care.
So it's not just about hitting the gym or following the latest diet trend, but about tuning into what our bodies actually need.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you and what brings you a sense of vitality and well-being, and it's different for everyone.
Okay, that makes sense.
Hmm.
What about the mental dimension? What does holistic self-improvement look like there?
Mentally, it's about engaging in activities that stimulate and challenge our minds.
Okay.
This could be reading, learning new skills, having thought-provoking conversations, or even just solving puzzles.
Right.
It's about feeding our curiosity and staying mentally active.
So always learning and exploring new things.
Yes. And embracing a growth mindset,
Mm-hmm.
seeing challenges as opportunities to learn and expand,
Okay.
rather than as threats or setbacks.
I can see how that ties back into the self-compassion we were talking about earlier.
Absolutely. It's all connected. And speaking of connection, what about the emotional side of things?
Okay, yeah. Emotions can be tricky.
Right.
What does holistic self-improvement look like in the realm of feelings?
Emotionally, it's about developing self-awareness.
Okay.
That means being able to recognize and understand our emotions without judgment.
Right.
It's about learning healthy ways to process our emotions
Yeah.
and express them constructively.
It sounds like it's about becoming more comfortable with the full spectrum of human emotion, not just trying to suppress or ignore the negative ones.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
And it's also about engaging in activities that bring us joy and fulfillment, nurturing our relationships, and cultivating emotional resilience, our ability to bounce back from challenges.
Okay, and finally, the spiritual dimension. This one feels a little more mysterious to me.
Mm-hmm.
What does holistic self-improvement look like in this area?
Spiritually, it's about connecting with something larger than ourselves, something that gives us a sense of meaning and purpose.
Okay.
This might involve meditation, prayer, spending time in nature, engaging in acts of service, or exploring different spiritual traditions.
So it's about finding what resonates with us personally and nurturing that connection.
Exactly. There's no one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
It's about finding what feeds your soul and helps you feel connected to something greater.
With all these different dimensions to consider,
Yeah,
it's easy to feel overwhelmed.
right.
Any advice on how to approach this without getting totally lost in the process?
Don't try to do everything at once.
Go.
Start small. Choose one or two practices from each dimension that resonate with you and gradually incorporate them into your routine.
So progress over perfection.
Mm-hmm.
I can get behind that.
Exactly. And remember that crucial concept of letting go. We touched on it earlier, but it's worth emphasizing again because it's so important in holistic self-improvement.
Right. We were talking about how letting go is about releasing that need to control every outcome.
Yes.
Trusting that things are unfolding as they should.
Yes.
And having faith in something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly.
But honestly, how do we actually do that? It sounds so much easier said than done.
It's a practice, and it takes time.
Okay.
One way to start is by becoming aware of the areas where you're holding on too tightly.
Right.
What are those specific goals, beliefs, or even relationships that are causing you stress or anxiety?
Mm-hmm.
Are you clinging to an outcome that might not be serving your highest good?
So the first step is awareness. Noticing those areas where we're white-knuckling it.
Exactly. And once you've identified those areas, you can start to gently practice releasing your grip.
Okay.
Ask yourself, what would it feel like to let go of this need to control? What would it feel like to trust that things are unfolding as they should, even if it doesn't look the way I expected?
It sounds scary, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like letting go of that control feels like free falling into the unknown.
It can feel that way at first, but remember, you're not actually alone in that free fall.
Okay.
There's a safety net, a higher power, a universal intelligence, whatever resonates with you that's always supporting you.
Okay, so it's about shifting that trust from our limited ego minds to something bigger. But how do we cultivate that trust, especially when things are feeling chaotic or uncertain?
One way is to start small.
Okay.
Choose one small area where you can practice letting go. Maybe it's a need to control a specific outcome or a belief that's no longer serving you.
Right.
Notice how it feels to loosen your grip, even just a little bit. Observe what happens when you surrender to the flow of life rather
Right.
than trying to force things.
So it's about taking baby steps and building that trust muscle over time.
Exactly. And remember, it's a practice, not a perfect performance. There will be times when you fall back into old habits of control.
Right.
Be kind to yourself,
Yeah.
notice what's happening,
Yeah.
and gently guide yourself back to that place of trust.
This is all so helpful, but I can imagine our listeners might be feeling a bit like they're on this journey alone.
Yeah, it's easy to feel that way.
The sources also talked about the importance of community and support, and I think that's such a key piece of this puzzle. Welcome back to the deep dive. In the last two parts, we've really been exploring this idea of self-improvement from a spiritual perspective, which is so different from the usual goal-setting and habit-building advice. It's more about cultivating a whole new way of being.
Exactly. We've talked about recognizing our inherent wholeness, finding balance, embracing a holistic approach, and even the power of letting go. Now it's time to bring all of this into our daily lives.
Yes, let's get practical. I'm all for these profound concepts, but I think a lot of us are left wondering, okay, but how do I actually do this?
I agree. Bridging that gap between theory and action is crucial. So let's revisit a concept we touched on earlier, self-awareness. We talked about how it's about understanding our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. But how do we actually cultivate that awareness? It can feel a bit abstract.
It does. Like, I get the concept intellectually, but putting it into practice feels like a whole other challenge.
That's where specific practices come in. One of the simplest, yet most powerful, is journaling. Taking just a few minutes each day to write down your thoughts and feelings can be incredibly insightful. Don't worry about grammar or making it sound perfect. Just let your thoughts flow onto the page.
So it's like a brain dump, getting it all out of my head and onto paper.
Exactly. And the key here is to then go back and observe what you've written without judgment. Notice any patterns or recurring themes, what triggers certain emotions, what beliefs seem to be driving your actions. Journaling helps you become more aware of your inner landscape.
I can see how that would be helpful. Are there other practices that can support this self-awareness journey?
Absolutely. Mindfulness meditation is another powerful tool. We've discussed this before, but it's worth revisiting. Mindfulness is about bringing your attention to the present moment, observing your thoughts, feelings, and bodily sensations without getting carried away by them.
So it's about noticing those thoughts and feelings without judgment, like we were talking about with journaling.
Precisely. And the beauty of mindfulness is that you can practice it anytime, anywhere. You don't need any special equipment or a dedicated hour of silence. You can practice while walking, washing dishes, or even waiting in line at the grocery store.
It's about bringing that awareness to even the most mundane activities. I like that.
And the more you practice, the more natural it becomes to tap into that state of mindful awareness throughout your day. It's like building a mental muscle.
Okay, so we've got journaling and mindfulness meditation. Any other tools we can add to our self-awareness toolkit?
Sometimes the simplest approach is the most effective. Throughout your day, simply pause and ask yourself a few questions. What am I feeling right now? What thoughts are running through my mind? What's motivating my actions at this moment?
So it's about checking in with ourselves regularly, not just letting those thoughts and emotions run on autopilot.
Exactly. Even a quick mental check-in can make a big difference in bringing more awareness to your inner world.
I love how practical this all is. It feels doable, not like some overwhelming overhaul of my entire life.
That's the key. Small, consistent steps are much more effective than trying to change everything at once and then burning out. Speaking of small steps, what about those intentions we were discussing earlier? How do we set intentions that actually have power?
Right. We were talking about how the energy behind an intention really matters. Intentions rooted in fear or lack will manifest differently than those grounded in love and self-acceptance.
Exactly. So when setting an intention, take some time to reflect on your why. What's the deeper desire or value that's driving this intention? Are you trying to prove something? Or are you coming from a place of genuine self-love?
So it's not enough to just say, I want to be more confident. I need to dig deeper and understand what's motivating that desire.
Precisely. And once you have that clarity, write down your intention in a positive present tense statement. For example, instead of I want to be less stressed, you might say I'm calm and peaceful.
So it's about claiming that desired state as if it's already true, feeling the emotion of it.
Exactly. And here's where visualization can be a powerful tool. Close your eyes and imagine yourself embodying that intention. What does it feel like to be calm and peaceful? What do you see, hear, and sense in your body?
That's such a great reminder. We talked about visualization earlier, but I think a lot of people underestimate its power.
It's a practice that's often overlooked, but it can be incredibly effective in shifting our energy and aligning ourselves with our intentions.
All of this makes so much sense, but I think the biggest challenge for a lot of people, myself included, is dealing with those inevitable setbacks. Life doesn't always go according to plan, and it's easy to spiral into self-criticism when things don't go our way.
You're absolutely right. That's where self-compassion becomes so crucial. Remember, it's about treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a close friend who's struggling.
Okay, but how do we actually do that? It's easy to say, be kind to yourself, but it's much harder to put it into practice, especially when we're feeling disappointed or frustrated with ourselves.
It starts with awareness. Notice your self-talk. When you make a mistake or face a challenge, what do you say to yourself? Is it harsh, critical, and judgmental? Or is it kind, supportive, and understanding?
I think a lot of us have that inner critic that's way more brutal than we would ever be to anyone else.
That's so common, but we can shift that inner dialogue. When you notice those negative thoughts creeping in, consciously try to replace them with more compassionate ones. What would you say to a friend in the same situation? Offer yourself that same level of understanding.
So instead of, I can't believe I messed that up again, it's more like, okay, that didn't go as planned, but everyone makes mistakes. I'm learning and growing from this.
Exactly. And remember, you're not alone in this. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone faces challenges. It's part of being human. And speaking of being human, let's not forget about self-care.
Right. Self-care is such an important part of this equation, but it's often the first thing to go out the window when we're busy or stressed.
I know. It's easy to see self-care as a luxury, but it's truly a necessity. It's an act of self-compassion. It's about prioritizing your well-being and giving yourself permission to rest, recharge, and do things that bring you joy.
I think a lot of people struggle with feeling guilty about taking time for themselves, like it's somehow selfish or indulgent.
I hear that a lot, but the truth is, you can't pour from an empty cup. When you neglect your own needs, you end up depleted and less able to show up fully in your life, both for yourself and for others.
So what are some examples of self-care practices that we can incorporate into our lives, even if we're short on time?
It looks different for everyone, but some ideas include spending time in nature, taking a relaxing bath, listening to music, reading a book, engaging in creative pursuits, moving your body in ways that feel good, spending time with loved ones, or simply doing nothing at all.
I love how simple and accessible those are. It's about finding those little pockets of time throughout the day to nourish ourselves, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Exactly. And remember, it's not selfish to prioritize your well-being. It's an act of self-love that benefits everyone around you.
This has been so insightful. We've covered so much ground: cultivating self-awareness, setting powerful intentions, practicing self-compassion, and prioritizing self-care.
Before we wrap up, I want to circle back to one last concept, letting go. We talked about how important this is, but it can also feel like one of the most challenging aspects of self-improvement. Any final tips for putting this into practice?
Remember, letting go isn't about giving up or becoming passive. It's about surrendering the need to control every outcome and trusting that things are unfolding as they should, even if it doesn't look the way we expected.
So it's about surrendering to something bigger than ourselves, having faith that there's a higher intelligence at work, even when we can't see the whole picture. Beautifully said. It's about cultivating that trust, even in the midst of uncertainty. And remember, it's a practice, not a perfect performance. There will be times when you fall back into old habits of control. Be kind to yourself, notice what's happening, and gently guide yourself back to that place of trust.
It sounds like letting go is ultimately an act of both courage and surrender.
You've hit the nail on the head. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. Reach out to your supportive community, seek guidance from mentors, connect with nature, and most importantly, trust that inner wisdom that's always guiding you.
This has been such a profound and inspiring deep dive into the spiritual side of self-improvement. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired and empowered to embark on their own journey of growth and transformation.
I hope so too. Remember, self-improvement isn't about becoming someone else. It's about uncovering and expressing your most authentic, radiant self. It's about embracing your wholeness and embarking on a journey of continuous growth, evolution, and self-discovery.
Beautifully said. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.